The universe has the cruelest sense of humor. One second I was sipping bad coffee and scrolling through my phone. The next I opened my eyes inside a goddamn romance novella's the villain. Not the mysterious stranger or the beloved protagonist. No. I was the bitter ex-boyfriend. The shadow lurking in his life. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or maybe throw up. Instead, I just stared at my reflection in the cracked mirror of a cheap Brooklyn apartment, wondering how the hell I was supposed to survive a story that already decided my role. The man who broke his heart. His name Ethan Cole. In this world, he wasn't just a man. He was the man. The golden boy every reader fell for. Kind, stubborn, strong in the quietest ways. And me. I was the one who hurt him. I was the reason for his walls, his scars, his broken smile. The irony. In my real life, before all of this, I had never even been in love. The novel wasted no time throwing me into his orbit. On my second day here, I ran into him outside a cafe in Manhattan. Literally coffee splashed across his shirt. His hazel eyes snapping up to meet mine with a flash of recognition so sharp it cut through me. Of course, he muttered, bitterness dripping from every syllable. You. That one word carried years of history I hadn't lived, but somehow belonged to. His gaze pinned me like a criminal caught red-handed. I should have apologized, walked away, stayed in my lane like a good little side character. But something in Mesteborn, stupid, reckless, made me hold his stare. Missed me, I said, smirking, my voice steadier than my pulse. The world tilted. His jaw tightened. His lips pressed into a line. But beneath the anger I saw a thirst. The kind that lingers too long. That rots quietly until it becomes part of who you are. And it gutted me. Because even though I hadn't lived our past, I could feel it pressing against me. Heavy and suffocating. That night, I lay awake in my tiny apartment. The city noise bleeding through thin walls. My chest ached in a way I didn't recognize. Guilt for something I hadn't done. Longing for someone who wasn't mine. The worst part. The novel didn't care about my confusion. It had a script, and I was expected to follow it, torment him, remind him of the pain, push him closer to the real protagonist, the one he was destined to love. But destiny had never met me before. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan was everywhere. At the gallery downtown where his photographs hung like windows into his soul. At the library where he sat alone, headphones in, pretending not to see me pass. At the bar where mutual friends dragged me along. His laughter sharp enough to cut me from across the room. And every time, the story wanted me to sneer, to spit venom, to be the bitter echo of a love gone wrong. But I couldn't. Because each time I saw him, his tired eyes, his forced smiles, the way his fingers tapped anxiously against his glass eye, felt myself slipping. The villain wasn't supposed to fall in love again. One evening, rain hammered the streets, and I found myself outside his building without meaning to. The kind of scene every romance novel would milk for all its drama. I told myself I'd just turn around, that I'd go back to my apartment, order cheap takeout, pretend none of this existed. But then the door swung open, and there he was, Ethan, hoodie pulled up, backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. His eyes landed on me, and the world held its breath. Stalking me now. His voice was sharp, defensive. I wanted to say yes, to admit that I couldn't stop orbiting him, even when the universe demanded I push him away. Instead, I shrugged, just passing by. He didn't believe me, but he didn't slam the door, either. For a moment, the rain softened around us, and I swore I saw something raw flickering in his gaze. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Like maybe, Just maybe. He still remembered what it felt like when we weren't broken. The thing about being trapped in someone else's story is that you're supposed to play a part. But what happens when you start wanting to rewrite it? Because every time I touched this world, I could feel the narrative pushing back. A snide remark spilling from my lips without my permission. A cruel smirk tugging at my mouth when all I wanted was to smile. The novel wanted me to be poison. But every time Ethan looked at me, I wanted to be antidote. And that terrified me more than anything. I thought I could fight it alone. Pretend I didn't care. But then came the night of his exhibition. The one where the entire city seemed to gather to worship his art. I walked in, uninvited, my heart pounding like a drumbeat of bad decisions. And there, hanging in the center of the room, was a photograph of us. Not us now. Us then. A stolen moment from a past I never lived but still felt two boys on a rooftop. Laughter caught midair, his head tilted against mine, the skyline a blur behind us. I froze. The air went thin. People whispered, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breath breaking apart. Then his voice, low and steady, cutting through the noise. "Do you like it?" I turned, and he was right there. Close enough to touch. Close enough to destroy me. "I don't deserve it," I whispered. His eyes narrowed, confusion flickering beneath the guarded anger. "For once, you're right." And just like that, the world reminded May wasn't here to win him back. I was here to haunt him, to be the shadow that made his new love shine brighter. But I couldn't shake it. The way his hands trembled when he said it. The way his voice cracked on the edges of rage. Because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't done with me either. That night, as I walked the wet streets of New York alone, I realized something dangerous. This wasn't just his story anymore. It was mine too. And I wasn't going to let a novel decide how it ended. Silence has a weight. Can smother a room, crawl under your skin, stretch seconds into eternity. That's what it felt like every time Ethan and I were forced into the same space. The kind of silence that isn't empty at all, it's full of everything we don't say. The night of his exhibition stayed with me like a scar. The photograph of us, the bite of his words, the way his eyes refused to let go of mine. It replayed in my head until I couldn't tell if it was memory or punishment. And then came the text. I wasn't supposed to get one. In this world, he had no reason to reach out to me. But there it was. A single message lighting up my phone at 1:17 a.m. "We need to talk." Two things hit me at once. First, the obvious dread, like the novel itself had finally tightened the noose around my neck. Second, the spark of something I didn't want to name. Hope. He chose a cafe downtown. Neutral ground. Crowded enough that neither of us could explode without witnesses. I showed up early, because apparently being trapped in fiction didn't erase my nervous habits. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When he walked in, it was like the entire place tilted. Ethan had that kind of presence. Quiet but undeniable. He scanned the room, saw me, and his expression hardened instantly. No hesitation, no smile, just walls. He sat across from me, his shoulders stiff. "I don't know what game you're playing," he said, voice low but sharp. "But I'm not interested." I opened my mouth, then shut it, because the truth was insane. Funny story. I woke up in a novel and I'm actually not the ex who ruined your life. I'm just a guy who got stuck here by accident. Yeah. That would go over great. Instead, I leaned back, forcing a smirk I didn't feel. Maybe I'm not playing a game. Bullshit. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. That's all you ever do. Manipulate. Push. Pull. Make me question everything until I can't even trust my own feelings. The words hit me like glass shattering inside my chest. And the worst part, they weren't even mine. They belonged to the version of me this world had written into his past. Ethan, I said quietly, my mask slipping despite myself. I don't want to hurt you. For the first time, he hesitated. Just a flicker. But it was enough. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted away. And in that split second, I saw the truth. He didn't hate me as much as he wanted to. We didn't finish our coffee. We didn't make peace. But as he walked out, I realized something terrifying. The story was bending. That conversation wasn't supposed to happen. The novel wanted us locked in hatred, stuck in predictable loops. Instead, we cracked it open, just a little. And once a crack appears, it spreads. The shift came slowly, like an unspoken truce neither of us acknowledged. He stopped avoiding me quite so violently. I caught him looking at me longer than he should, his guard slipping when he thought I wasn't paying attention. One night, at a friend's party, it happened. We ended up on the same balcony, the city glittering below us, the music muffled through glass doors. Funny. I said, leaning on the railing. We always end up outside. He gave me a sideways glance, suspicious but tired. That's because you never belonged inside. I should have let the jab slide. Instead, I turned to him fully. Maybe I never belonged anywhere but next to you. The words hung between us like smoke. He froze, his breath catching, his walls visibly cracking for just a second before he shook his head. You don't get to say things like that, he whispered. Not after everything. But his voice broke at the edges. And for one reckless heartbeat, I thought he might let me in. The novel pushed back harder after that. I could feel it in the way people looked at me, conversations twisting against my favor, situations designed to corner me into being the villain again. Like when I found myself face to face with him, the man Ethan was supposed to end up with. Daniel. Perfect. Polished. Everything the story wanted. He was charming in a way that felt manufactured, like a character written to be adored. Stay away from him, Daniel said, his tone calm but lethal. You've done enough damage. And maybe I should have listened. Maybe the smarter move was to back down. Let the story play out. But I couldn't. Because every time Ethan looked at me, every time I caught that flash of something real in his eyes, I knew I wasn't just a chapter to be discarded. I was rewriting myself into his narrative, whether this world liked it or not. Then came the rain again. New York always knew how to set a stage. I was heading home, soaked through, when I saw him, Ethan, standing outside his building, staring up at the sky like he wanted it to wash him clean. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the way his shoulders slumped, or the fact that for once he didn't notice me right away. But I walked up, close enough that the rain blurred the distance between us. You'll catch a cold, I said, trying to sound casual. He finally turned, and for once there was no venom in his gaze. Just exhaustion. Just truth. Maybe I don't care, he murmured. Something broke in me then. The script, the roles, the entire damn novelet all burned away in that moment. All I saw was him. Before I could stop myself, I reached out, brushing wet strands of hair from his face. My hand lingered, trembling against his cheek. He didn't move, didn't flinch. His breath hitched, his eyes closing just slightly. And for the first time, I thought maybe he wanted this too. But just as quickly, he stepped back. The rain fell harder, a curtain between us. I can't, he whispered, voice cracking. Not with you. And then he was gone, disappearing into the building, leaving me standing there with the rain swallowing me whole. Back in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling, my heart in ruins. The novel wanted me to be his mistake, his shadow, the ghost he had to overcome. But I wanted to be his future, and I had no idea if I was strong enough to fight fate itself. The city never sleeps, but it sure as hell knows how to remind you when you're alone. Nights stretched longer after the rain. Every neon sign I passed humming like a cruel reminder that Ethan had walked away. But here's the thing about heartbreak in someone else's story: it doesn't fade quietly. It grows louder, heavier, until it claws its way into every corner of your life. The novel wanted me bitter. It wanted me angry. Instead, I was terrified, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way Ethan had leaned into my hand before he pulled away. That single second was enough to ruin me. I tried drowning it out. Nights in crowded bars, anonymous hands brushing against me, conversations that blurred into static. But nothing stuck. No one felt like him. And then fate, if that's what you call a cruel author with a god complex, threw us back together. It was an art studio downtown. One of those renovated warehouses with tall windows and overpriced wine at the entrance. A mutual friend had invited me, and I told myself I'd swing by, stay 20 minutes, then leave before the world collapsed again. Except he was there. Ethan, bent over a canvas, sleeves rolled up, brush moving like his hand carried secrets the rest of him would never admit. I froze in the doorway, heat crawling up my neck. He looked different when he worked. Softer. More real than the polished version everyone else saw. Daniel was there too, hovering close, pretending to admire a half-finished piece while really keeping an eye on Ethan. The golden boy playing his role to perfection. And me. I was the ghost. Again. You came, Ethan said flatly when he finally noticed me. No surprise in his voice, just resignation, like the universe had cursed him with my presence. I forced a smirk. Miss me? His glare could have cut through steel. Don't start. Daniel stepped in then, his arm brushing against Ethan's, subtle but possessive. Some people never learn when they're not wanted, he said smoothly, his eyes flicking to me like a challenge. I should have walked away. I should have let the story play out. But instead I laughed, sharp and humorless. Funny. You talk like he's yours. But last I checked, he still looks at me like I'm the one he can't forget. The air snapped tight. Ethan's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening around the brush in his hand. Daniel's expression didn't falter, but his grip on Ethan's shoulder did. And for one wild second, I felt I wasn't just fighting the novel anymore. I was fighting for him. Later that night, when the crowd thinned and Daniel finally left, I lingered in the studio. Ethan didn't tell me to go, though he didn't look at me either. He just painted, strokes harsh, colors bleeding into one another like a storm on canvas. You really hate me? I asked quietly, breaking the silence. His brush stilled. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, without looking up, he said, I hate what you did to me. The weight of his words crushed me, because I hadn't done it, not really. But the man I was forced to replace had. And Ethan's pain was real, whether I deserved it or not. I stepped closer, my chest tight. What if I'm not the same person anymore? He finally looked at me then, eyes blazing, raw and beautiful in their fury. People don't change. They just learn how to hide the same mistakes better. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him everything, that I didn't belong here, that I was rewriting myself with every breath. But instead, all I could say was, Then let me prove you wrong. His lips parted like he might respond, but no words came. And in the silence, I felt it again, that impossible pull. The magnetic thread between us that the novel kept trying to sever. The days after blurred into a dangerous rhythm. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies. We existed in that fragile space in between, colliding when we should have avoided each other, circling when we should have walked away. And slowly, I saw pieces of him the novel hadn't shown before. The way he hummed when he worked late into the night. The way he carried a notebook everywhere, filled with half-written poems he'd never share. The way his laughter, when it slipped past his guard, felt like sunlight after a storm. Each discovery carved me deeper, tethering me to him in ways I couldn't escape. One night, after another endless evening at the studio, he surprised me. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly, not looking at me. My heart stuttered. "Regret what?" "Us." His voice cracked on the word, soft but lethal. I swallowed hard. "Every day." He finally turned, his eyes searching mine, like he was trying to catch me in a lie. But I didn't flinch, because for once, it wasn't a lie at all. And in that moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he wanted to believe me. But of course, the novel wasn't done punishing us. Daniel showed up again, this time at a rooftop party. He cornered me, his smile polite but his words sharpened to a blade. "You're disrupting the story," he said calmly, as if he knew, as if he was in on it. My blood went cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You were written to lose. Don't forget that." And just like that, I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't just the golden boy. He was part of the machinery of this world. The piece designed to keep Ethan away from me. Which meant if I wanted to change the ending, I'd have to tear the whole story apart. That night, as I stood on the balcony watching Ethan laugh with friends inside, I made myself a promise. I didn't care what the novel wanted. I wasn't here to haunt him. I was here to love him. Even if it destroyed the story. The world didn't end after that rooftop party. But it felt like something shifted inside me. Daniel's words weren't just a warning. They were a threat. And the scariest part, he was right. This novel had rules. Invisible lines I was never meant to cross. And every time Ethan looked at me a second too long, every time I said something unscripted, I was breaking them. But I couldn't stop. The next week, Ethan and I collided again in the most cliché way possible: Times Square. Bright lights, endless noise, people rushing in every direction, and somehow, he was just there. Standing in the middle of it all, like the universe had placed him exactly where I'd find him. He saw me before I saw him. His expression shifted instantly, from open to closed, from vulnerable to guarded. But I caught a flicker of something he didn't want me to see. Following me again? He asked when I reached him, his tone dripping with suspicion. I exhaled a laugh, though my chest felt tight. "What are the odds? Maybe fate's playing matchmaker. Or maybe you're just pathetic," he shot back. I should have let him walk away. I should have played my part and kept the bitterness alive. But the words burned in my throat, demanding to be spoken. "You don't mean that." He froze, his back to me, shoulders tense. For a long moment, the crowd surged around us, horns blaring, neon flashing. And then, slowly, he turned. "Give me one reason," he said quietly, dangerously, "why I should believe you've changed." My heart stuttered. The truth pressed against my ribs, begging to escape. That I wasn't him. Not really. That I was someone new. someone who could love him better than the novel ever allowed. But all I said was, because every time I see you, I don't want to be the man who hurt you. I want to be the man who makes it right. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as if he wanted to tear me apart for daring to say it. But his hand twitched like he wanted to reach for me. I caught his wrist before he could pull away, gripping it gently but firmly. "Tell me you don't feel it," I whispered. "Tell me this is just hate, and I'll let you go." His breath hitched. The city blurred. For one impossible second, it was just us. Then he yanked his hand free. "You don't get to rewrite history," he said, his voice breaking in a way that nearly undid me. "Not after what you did." And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. I should have felt defeated. But instead, I felt alive. Because I'd seen it just for a moment, the truth in his eyes. He wasn't as sure as he pretended. The novel wanted me to be his ghost. But Ethan, he still carried me like a scar that wouldn't fade. And scars, I realized, aren't just reminders of pain. They're proof that something mattered. The tension between us only grew after that. Every time we crossed paths, it was a war. Words like blades, glances like sparks. We fought because we couldn't stop circling each other. And we circled because we couldn't let go. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. And he hated it. One night, after another exhausting confrontation at a mutual friend's dinner, Daniel cornered me outside. His smile was sharp, his tone low. "You think this is about love?" he asked. "It's not. It's about narrative. You're a plot device. That's all you'll ever be." I stepped closer, fury tightening my throat. Funny. If I'm just a plot device, why does he still look at me like that? Daniel's eyes darkened. For the first time, his perfect mask cracked. "Because you're the wound," he hissed. "And wounds only heal when you stop picking at them." He walked away before I could answer, leaving me with the kind of silence that rang louder than any words. But I didn't need to argue. Because deep down, I knew something he didn't. I wasn't just reopening an old wound. I was stitching myself into it, thread by fragile thread. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. Ethan called me. Not a text. Not a chance encounter. A call. His voice was tight, angry, almost trembling. "Meet me," he said. No explanation. No room for refusal. When I arrived at his apartment, he was pacing, his eyes wild. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "What the hell are you doing to me?" he demanded the second I stepped inside. I blinked. "What?" "You show up everywhere. You say things you shouldn't know. You look at me like," his voice cracked, and he turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Like you're not the same person who broke me." My stomach dropped. He'd noticed. He'd felt it. I stepped closer, my chest tight. "Maybe I'm not." He spun, eyes blazing. Don't play with me. If you've changed, if you're different, then who the hell are you?" The truth clawed at me, raw and desperate. I wanted to tell him everything, that I wasn't really his ex, that I'd been thrown into this world without choice, that all I wanted now was him. But the novel tightened its grip. My throat closed. The words caught, like invisible hands strangling the confession before it could form. Instead, I cupped his face in my hands, my voice shaking. "I'm someone who can't stop loving you, no matter what." His breath hitched, his eyes wide, and for one impossible moment he didn't pull away. Then, slowly, painfully, he whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive you." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced a smile. Then let me show you. One day at a time. He closed his eyes, his body trembling under my touch. And though he didn't answer, he didn't push me away either. And that was enough to keep me alive. That night, as I walked home under the heavy silence of the city, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. The novel was losing its grip. Because this wasn't just his story anymore. It was ours. Ethan didn't forgive me that night. But he also didn't shut me out. And in this twisted world, that small crack of mercy felt like a miracle. I found myself drifting into his orbit more and more, sometimes by accident. Sometimes because I couldn't help it. Coffee shops. Galleries. The kind of mundane places where two people who once loved each other too much might accidentally brush shoulders. Only it wasn't an accident. Not anymore. One evening, I found him sitting on the steps outside his building, head tilted back against the brick wall, eyes closed. He looked exhausted, like the city had drained everything from him. Rough day? I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. His eyes flicked open, irritation sparking for a moment before it faded. What do you care? I sat down beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his shoulder. I shouldn't, I admitted. But I do. He didn't move away. That was something. We sat in silence for a while. The kind that wasn't sharp this time. Just heavy. Honest. Finally, he whispered, "You don't make sense to me anymore." I turned my head. What do you mean? You're not who I remember. His voice was low, almost broken. You're saying things you never would have said. Looking at me like, his throat tightened, and he shook his head. Like you still love me. I swallowed hard. Maybe I do. His laugh was bitter, but his eyes betrayed him. That would be easier if I didn't still love you too. The confession hit me like lightning. My chest ached, my hands trembling with the urge to pull him close. But I didn't. Not yet. Because love wasn't the problem here, trust was. The novel pushed back harder after that. I could feel it, like invisible hands tugging at the threads of fate, trying to stitch us back into the roles we were meant to play. Daniel showed up everywhere. Polite, polished, perfectly timed. He was the safety net Ethan was supposed to fall into, the light after my storm. And he played his part with flawless precision, too flawless. One night, at another gallery opening, I watched Daniel place his hand on Ethan's back as they moved through the crowd. To everyone else, it looked natural, protective. To me, it looked rehearsed. When I caught Ethan's eyes across the room, he looked tired, like the performance was weighing on him. And then, despite Daniel's arm around him, his gaze lingered on me. That was all the proof I needed. Later, outside, caught him alone. You don't love him, I said before I could stop myself. Ethan stiffened, turning to me with fire in his eyes. Don't you dare. I see it. I cut in, stepping closer. You smile at him. You let him hold you. But when you look at me, I lowered my voice, raw and desperate. When you look at me, it's real. His breath hitched. For a second, just a second, his defenses cracked wide open. Then he shoved me back, his hands trembling. Stop, he whispered, his voice shaking. Stop making me feel this way. My chest ached. I'm not making you. You already do. That night, couldn't sleep. The novel's walls were trembling. I could feel it every time Ethan let me close. Every time his heart betrayed him before his head could stop it. But I also knew the world wouldn't let me win easily. And I was right. A week later, It all came crashing down. Ethan invited me over. I don't know why I went, I should have known better. But when he opened the door, his eyes softer than I'd seen in months, I couldn't resist. We talked. We laughed. God, I'd forgotten how easy it was to laugh with him. For a moment, it felt like the past didn't matter, like the novel had lost its grip entirely. And then he kissed me. It was hesitant at first, broken, trembling with all the things we hadn't said. But the second his lips touched mine, the world spun out of control. I kissed him back like I'd been waiting a lifetime, like I didn't care if the story burned around us. His hands tangled in my shirt. Mine cupped his face. And it was everything raw, desperate, unstoppable. When we finally pulled apart, gasping for breath, his forehead rested against mine. I hate you, he whispered. I hate how much I still want you. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Then hate me forever. Just don't let me go. But nothing in this world came without consequences. The next morning, Daniel was waiting outside Ethan's apartment. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned like fire. You've made your choice, he said coldly, looking past me to Ethan. But don't think it ends here. For the first time, I saw something dangerous in him, something more than just jealousy. It was the story itself, fighting back through him. And suddenly, I realized the truth. Daniel wasn't just a character. He was the novel's enforcer. If I wanted Ethan, I wasn't just fighting a man. I was fighting fate itself. The storm of the story reached its peak. Daniel was no longer just a rival. He had become a weapon sharpened by the novel itself. Every time I got close to Ethan, he appeared always calm, always poised, but his words cut like knives. The narrative was trying to correct itself, trying to pull Ethan back into the safety it had written for him. But Ethan was slipping through its grasp. Every time he looked at me, every time he let me hold him, I could feel the story cracking. The breaking point came one night when Daniel cornered me. His composure slipped, revealing the steel beneath. You don't belong here, he said, his voice low, dangerous. This world wasn't written for you. It was written for me, for him. I stared at him, unafraid. Then why does he keep choosing me? For the first time, Daniel faltered. His jaw clenched, and I saw it flicker of doubt, the truth he couldn't bury. He wasn't fighting for Ethan. He was fighting for the story. And the story was losing. Ethan was the one who finally broke free. It happened on a rooftop, the city buzzing quietly below, dawn painting the sky with soft light. He turned to me, his face raw with exhaustion, with heartbreak, with love. All my life, he whispered, I've been told to choose safety, to choose what's easy. Daniel is easy. He's kind, stable, everything I should want. His voice shook. But when I look at him, I don't feel alive. I don't feel like me. I stepped closer, my chest tight. And with me. His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, there was no anger, no fear, just truth. With you, I feel everything. Pain, joy, desire, hope. You've ruined me, and I don't want to be fixed. Before I could speak, he grabbed my shirt, pulled me against him, and kissed me like it was the first and last time all at once. The world shuddered. I felt the novel collapsing around us, the rules fracturing, the story unraveling. Daniel's voice echoed like a distant warning, but it was fading, powerless, because Ethan had chosen, not the safe path, not the one written for him, me. The days after were quiet in a way that felt surreal. No more interruptions, no more scripted moments, It was like the novel had given up, or maybe rewritten itself around us. Ethan and I were fragile at first, like survivors of a storm, afraid to believe the sun would keep shining. But slowly, we began to trust it. Trust us. We cooked dinners together in his small apartment, laughing when I burned the pasta. We argued over which movies to watch, then made up when we both fell asleep on the couch. We walked the city at night, hand in hand, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. The love that had once been toxic, bitter, broke-knit grew into something new, something real. And every time I looked at him, every time he smiled at me, I knew the truth. I hadn't been trapped in a romance novel. I'd been given a second chance to write our own. On the anniversary of the rooftop, Ethan and I returned there. The city stretched beneath us, alive, endless. He leaned against me, his head resting on my shoulder. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked softly. "About what?" How impossible this was. How everything was stacked against us. I laced my fingers with his, squeezing gently. Every day. And every day I'm glad we were stubborn enough to fight it. He smiled. That smile that had haunted me even when I didn't deserve it. "I don't think we fought it." I turned to him, curious. "What do you mean?" "We didn't fight the story," he whispered, pressing his lips to mine in a kiss that was soft, eternal. "We rewrote it." And just like that, the bitter ex who was meant to haunt him, the ghost of a love that should have died, became his forever. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.